Welcome to the online course on the Nibbāna sermons 23 to 33 by Bhikkhu Katakurunda Ñāṇananda, hosted by the Numata Center for Buddhist Studies at the University of Hamburg in collaboration with the Barra Center for Buddhist Studies in Massachusetts. And today we will be looking at sermon number 31. But before that, again, a few of the comments from the discussion forum. Letizia Baglioni on the unhappiness of renunciation. Even unhappiness born of sensing the fetters and longing for freedom has a safe, calm space all around it, as right mindfulness, right view, and other skillful factors are at hand. I thought that was a very beautiful way of putting it. Then Kim Allen made a practical related observation on this gradual refinement of feeling tones described in Salayatana Vibhanga. In observing my own thought patterns, I find that there are more options than stated in the four-stage process from the sutta and expounded by Venerable Ñāṇananda. For instance, just today I found my mind producing thoughts of unhappiness based on the household life. And noticing this, I reflected that such thoughts are totally conditioned, merely habitual and impermanent, and this immediately brought happiness. So it seems that unhappiness based on the household life can be surmounted by happiness based on renunciation, and equanimity based on renunciation can also surmount worldly unhappiness. And Robert replied that he thinks the scheme in the sutta is properly meant exemplary and does not try to draw a complete map. Yeah, I thought that was a very relevant observation by both of them. I think the main pattern in the first part of the exposition is simply to provide a shift of perspective from the hedonic tone of Vedana, which is what normally evaluations and preferences are based on, to their quality in terms of here expressed as household or renunciate, but in a more general sense in terms of their ethical dimension, or more precisely their relevance to progress on the path. And so from that perspective, just saying whatever feeling tone is experienced, be it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, a shift from those of the household life to those of renunciation. And I don't think this would then be meant to exclude cases like described by Kim. If from unhappiness of the household life it's possible to shift to happiness of renunciation, so much the better. And the next step then, where the Pali version recommends to go from the sadness of renunciation to surmount that with the help of the happiness of renunciation. Actually, quite interestingly, the Chinese parallel has it the opposite. This you can find that discussed in my comparative study of the Majjhima Nikaya, page 784. So the parallel versions agree that the peak point, the final point, is the equanimity based on renunciation. But the progression towards that, the two have the opposite ways. Whereas the Pali version recommends to use the joy of renunciation to leave behind the sadness of renunciation, the Madhyama Agama has the opposite. And Hedwig commented on that beautiful verse exchange at the outset of Samyutta Nikaya on this, the Buddha, where the Buddha explains the need to avoid both standstill and struggling. And this is the very best description to me how to apply just the right amount of energy as to continue one's way out of the whirlpool of samsara. One continually applies just enough energy to proceed, never stopping to apply it, nor starting to fight and use up the energy all at once. Yeah, that is indeed a very important and very helpful summary and perspective that need to be continuous in the application of energy, never stopping, but also not overdoing it because then one gets exhausted. This is often the case when there is too much drive, thrust, wanting to get it. And then there is a lot of pushing. And then when it doesn't bring immediately the right results, then there is the other extreme of dropping it. And I've seen that with many practitioners. Anyhow, on to Sermon 31. Etang santang etang panitang yadidang sabba sankara samato sabbo paripati nissaggo tanha gayo virago nirodho nibbāna. This is peaceful, this is excellent, namely the stilling of all preparations, the relinquishment of all assets, the destruction of craving, detachment, cessation, extinction. With the permission of the assembly of the Venerable Meditative Monks, this is the 31st sermon in the series of sermons on Nibbāna. In our attempt to understand some subtle characteristics of the middle path leading to Nibbāna in our last sermon, we found some discourses like Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, Oga Tarana Sutta, Vitakka Santana Sutta, Magandhya Sutta, Ratavinita Sutta, and Alagadupama Sutta particularly helpful. It became clear that the twin principle of pragmatism and relativity, underlying the norm of dependent arising, could be gleaned to a great extent from those discourses. We also found that the course of practice leading to Nibbāna is not an accumulation or amassing, but a gradual process of attenuation or effacement, tending towards a realization of voidness, free from notions of I and mine. It is for the purpose of emphasizing the twin principles of pragmatism and relativity that the Buddha compared the Dhamma to a raft in the Alagadupama Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. In this series of sermons, we made allusions to this simile, in brief, on several occasions, but let us now try to examine this simile in more detail. In order to present the parable of the raft, the Buddha addressed the monks and made the following declaration. Kulupamang mo bhikkhave dhammang desissame nittaranatthaya no gahanatthaya. Monks, I shall preach to you the Dhamma comparable to a raft for crossing over and not for grasping. With this introductory declaration, he goes on to relate the parable of the raft. Monks, suppose a man in the course of a long journey saw a great expanse of water, whose near shore was dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore was safe and free from fear. But there was no ferry boat or bridge going to the far shore. Then he thought, there's this great expanse of water whose near shore is dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore is safe and free from fear. But there is no ferry boat or bridge going to the far shore. Suppose I collect grass, sticks, branches, and leaves, and bind them together into a raft, and supported by the raft and making an effort with my hands and feet, I were to get safely across to the far shore. And then the man collected grass, sticks, branches, and leaves, and bound them together into a raft. And supported by the raft and making an effort with his hands and feet, he got safely across to the far shore. Then, when he got safely across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus. This raft has been very helpful to me. Supported by it and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to hoist it on my head or load it on my shoulder and then go wherever I want. Now, monks, what do you think? By doing so, would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? No, Venerable Sir. By doing what would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? Ye monks, when that monk got across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus: this raft has been very helpful to me, since, supported by it and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to haul it on dry land, or set it adrift in the water, and then go wherever I want. Now it is by doing so that that man would be doing what should be done with the raft. Even so, monks, I have shown you the Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. And the Buddha concludes with the significant statement: Kullupamang va bhikkhave ajanante dhamma eva pahatabba pakeva adhamma. Monks, when you know the Dhamma to be similar to a raft, you should abandon even good states, how much more so bad states. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Ñāṇananda. I shall show you how the Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. Suppose a man in the course of a journey saw a great expanse of water whose near shore was dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore was safe and free from fear. But there was no ferry boat or bridge for going to the far shore. Then he thought, there's this great expanse of water whose near shore is dangerous and fearful, and whose further shore is safe and free from fear. But there's no ferry boat or bridge for going to the far shore. Suppose I collect grass, twig, branches, and leaves, and bind them together into a raft, and, supported by the raft and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. And then the man collected grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, and bound them together into a raft. And, supported by the raft and making an effort with his hands and feet, he got safely across to the far shore. Then, when he had got across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus: this raft has been very helpful to me, since, supported by it and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to hoist it on my head or load it on my shoulder and then go wherever I want. Now, bhikkhus, what do you think? By doing so, would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? No, Venerable Sir. By doing what would that man be doing what should be done with that raft? Here, bhikkhus, when that man got across and had arrived at the far shore, he might think thus: this raft has been very helpful to me, since, supported by it and making an effort with my hands and feet, I got safely across to the far shore. Suppose I were to haul it onto dry land, or set it adrift in the water, and then go wherever I want. Now, because it is by doing so that that man would be doing what should be done with that raft. So I have shown you how the Dhamma is similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping. Because when you know the Dhamma to be similar to a raft, you should abandon even the teachings, how much more so things contrary to the teachings. And the Madhyama Agama parallel. I have long taught you the teachings as resembling a raft, wanting you to give them up, not wanting you to cling to them. Why have I long taught you the teachings as resembling a raft, wanting you to give them up, not wanting you to cling to them? It is just as if there were a mountain river, very deep and extremely wide, a long stream with a swift current and with much material floating in it, also with no ferry boat and no bridge. Suppose a man comes along who has a matter to attend on the other bank and wants to cross over. As he is seeking a means to cross over, he thinks, now this mountain river is very deep and extremely wide, a long stream with a swift current and with much material floating in it, also with no ferry boat and no bridge. I have a matter to attend to on the other bank and want to cross over. By what skillful means can I safely reach the other bank? He further thinks, let me now gather grass and sticks on this bank, bind them together into a raft, and having boarded it, cross over. So he gathers grass and sticks on the near bank, binds them together into a raft, and having boarded it, crosses over. Having safely arrived there, he thinks, "Now this raft has been of much benefit to me. Boarding this raft has enabled me to cross over safely from that bank to this bank. Let me now, putting it on my shoulder or my head, carry it along as I go." He then puts the raft on his right shoulder or on his head to carry it along as he goes. What do you think? With such an idea, would he derive benefit from doing this with the raft? Then the monks replied, he could not. The Blessed One said, "Doing what with the raft could that man derive benefit?" The man thinks again, "Now I have derived much benefit from this raft. Boarding this raft has enabled me to cross over safely from that bank to this bank. Should I not rather put this raft back in the water or put it on the bank, abandon it there, and then go?" So the man puts the raft back in the water or puts it on the bank, abandons it there, and goes. What do you think? Would he derive benefit from doing this with the raft? The monks replied, "He benefits." The Blessed One said, "In the same way, I have long taught you the teachings as resembling a raft, wanting you to be prepared to let go of them, not wanting you to cling to them. If you understand that I have long taught you the teachings as resembling a raft, then you should be prepared to let go of these teachings. How much more so should you let go of whatever is contrary to these teachings?" End of comment. So it seems this raft simile has a very deep meaning. The building of the raft by the person wishing to cross symbolizes the pragmatic and relative values we highlighted in connection with the path of practice leading to Nibbāna. The raft improvised with self-effort is not for grasping or carrying on one's shoulder. As we have already pointed out with reference to such discourses like Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, apart from the purpose of crossing, there is nothing worth holding on to or grasping. Why so? Because the aim of this holy life or this path of practice is non-grasping instead of grasping, non-identification, attammayata instead of identification, tammayata, assetlessness, nirupadi instead of assets, upadi. The importance attached to this simile is so much that the Buddha reminds the monks of it in the Mahatanha Sankaya Sutta also, with the following allusion. Imanche tumme bhikkhave dinting evang parisuddhang evang pariyodhatang alliyata kellayata dhannayata mamayata apinu tumme bhikkhave kurupamang dhammang disirang ajaneyata nittaranataya no gahanataya no hetang bante. Imanche tumme bhikkhave ditting evang parisuddhang evang pariyodhatang na aliyeta, na kellayeta, na dhanayeta, na mamayeta. Apinutu me bhikkhave kurupamang dhammang disitang ajaneyata nittarnathaya no gahanataya. Evang bante. Monks, purified and cleansed as this view is, if you adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, treat it as a possession, would you then understand the Dhamma that has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over and not for the purpose of grasping? No, Venerable Sir. Monks, purified and cleansed as this view is, if you do not adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, and treat it as a possession, would you then understand the Dhamma that has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over and not for the purpose of grasping? Yes, Venerable Sir. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Ñāṇananda. Bhikkhus, purified and bright as this view is, if you adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, and treat it as a possession, would you then understand that the Dhamma has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over and not for the purpose of grasping? No, Venerable Sir. Bhikkhus, purified and bright as this view is, if you do not adhere to it, cherish it, treasure it, and treat it as a possession, would you then understand that the Dhamma has been taught as similar to a raft, being for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of grasping? Yes, Venerable Sir. And the Madhyama Agama. If, however, you were to say, this view of mine is so clear and pure, and if you were to cling to it, cherish it, guard it, and be unwilling to let go of it, then would you have understood the teaching I have for a long time taught you about the Dharma as resembling a raft, as being for opening up a channel that has been blocked? The monks replied, No, Blessed One. The Blessed One praised them, saying, it is well that you understand it in this way and see it in this way. If you were to say, this view of mine is so clean and pure, and yet you do not cling to it, do not cherish it, do not guard it, but are willing to let go of it, then would you have understood the teaching that I have for a long time taught you about the Dharma as resembling a raft, as being for opening up a channel that has been blocked? The monks replied, yes, Blessed One. End of comment. This is an illustration of the relative validity of the constituents of the path. Instead of an accumulation and an amassing, we have here setting in motion of the sequence of psychological states mutually interconnected according to the law of relativity. As in the simile of the relay of chariots, what we have here is a progression by relative dependence. In this sequential progression, we see an illustration of the quality of leading onward, Upanayika, characteristic of this Dhamma. The term Upanayika has been variously interpreted, but we get a clue to its correct meaning in the Udaya Sutta of the Bojjhanga Samyutta in the Samyutta Nikaya. When Lord Udaya declares his attainment of the supramundane path in these words, Dhammo cha me bhandya abhisamito, mago cha me patiladdo, yo me bhavito bahulikato, tatta viharantang tattatthaya upanissati. The Dhamma has been well understood by me, Venerable Sir, and that path has been obtained, which, when developed and cultivated, will lead me onwards to such states as I go on dwelling in the appropriate way. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. I have made the breakthrough to the Dhamma, Venerable Sir, and have obtained the path which, when I have developed and cultivated it, will lead me on while I am dwelling in the appropriate way to such a state. End of comment. The implication is that the Dhamma has the intrinsic quality of leading onward whoever is dwelling according to it, so that he attains states of distinction independent of another's intervention. A clearer illustration of this intrinsic quality can be found in the Cetana Karaniya Sutta among the texts of the Anguttara Nikaya. In that discourse, the Buddha describes how a long sequence of mental states is interconnected in a subtle way, according to the principle of relativity, leading onwards as far as final deliverance itself. The following section of that long discourse might suffice as an illustration of the mutual interconnection between the mental states in the list. Sīlavato bhikkhave sīla sampannassa cetanaya karaniyang avipatisaro me upanjatoti. Dhammata esa bhikkhave yang sīlavato sīla sampannassa avipatisaro upanjati. Avipatisare se bhikkhave nacitanaya karaniyang pamojjang me upanjatoti. Dhammata esa bhikkhave yang avapatisarissa pamojjang jayati. Pamuritasya bhikkhave citanaya karaniyang pīti me upanjatoti. Dhammata esa bhikkhave yang pamuritasya pīti upanjati. To one who is virtuous monks, who is endowed with virtue, there is no need for an act of will like let remorseless arise in me. It is in the nature of Dhamma monks that remorselessness arises in one who is virtuous, who is endowed with virtue. To one who is free from remorse, monks, there is no need for an act of will like let gladness arise in me. It is in the nature of Dhamma monks that gladness arises in one who is free from remorse. To one who is glad, monks, there is no need for an act of will like let joy arise in me. It is in the nature of Dhamma monks that joy arises in one who is glad. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Because for a virtuous person, one whose behavior is virtuous, no volition need be exerted to let non-regret arise in me. It is natural that non-regret arises in a virtuous person, one whose behavior is virtuous. For one without regret, no volition need be exerted to let joy arise in me. It is natural that joy arises in one without regret. For one who is joyful, no volition need be exerted, let rapture arise in me. It is natural that rapture rises in one who is joyful. End of comment. In this way, the Buddha outlines the entire course of training leading up to knowledge and vision of deliverance, interlacing a long line of mental states in such a way as to seem an almost effortless flow. The profound utterance with which the Buddha sums up this discourse is itself a tribute to the quality of leading onward, Upanayika, in this Dhamma. Itiko bhikkhave dhamma va dhamme abhisandenti, dhamma va dhamme paripuranti, appara parang gamanaya. Thus monks, mere phenomena flow into other phenomena, mere phenomena fulfill other phenomena, in the process of going from the not beyond to the beyond. Common translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Thus bhikkhus, one stage flows into the next stage. One stage fills up the next stage, for going from the near shore to the far shore. End of comment. So then, in the last analysis, it is only a question of phenomenon. There's no I or mine involved. That push, that impetus leading to Nibbāna, it seems, is found ingrained in the Dhamma itself. Not only the term Upanayika, all the 6 terms used to qualify the Dhamma are highly significant. They are also interconnected in meaning. That is why very often in explaining one term others are dragged in. Sometimes the questioner is concerned only about the meaning of the term Sandittika, but the Buddha presents to him all the 6 qualities of the Dhamma. In discourses like Mahatanha Sankaya Sutta, the emphasis is on the term Upanayika, but there too the Buddha brings in all the 6 terms, because they are associated in sense. Let us now examine how these 6 epithets are associated in sense. The usual explanation of Svakhata, well preached, is that the Dhamma has been preached by the Buddha properly intoned, with perfect symmetry, as to the letter and to the spirit, excellent in the beginning, excellent in the middle, and excellent in the end. But the true meaning of Svakhata emerges when examined from the point of view of practice. The quality of being visible here and now, Sandittika, that is not found in an ill-preached doctrine, Durakhata Dhamma, is to be found in this well-preached Dhamma. Whereas an ill-preached doctrine only promises a goal attainable in the next world, the well-preached Dhamma points to a goal attainable in this world itself. Therefore, we have to understand the full import of the epithet Svakhata in relation to the next quality, Sandittika, visible here and now. We have already dealt with this quality to some extent in connection with an episode about General Siha in an earlier sermon. Briefly stated, the meaning of the term Sandittika is visible here and now in this very life, as far as the results are concerned. The same idea is conveyed by the expression Ditteva Dhamme, often cited with reference to Nibbāna, in the standard phrase Ditteva Dhamme Saing Abhinya Satjikatva, having realized by one's own higher knowledge in this very life. Whereas Samparayika stands for what comes after death in another life, Sandittika points to the attainability of results in this very life, here and now. The term Sandittika can be related to the next epithet Akalika. Since the results are attainable here and now, it does not involve an interval in time. It is, in other words, timeless, Akalika. In our earlier sermons, we brought in as an illustration for this involvement with time the period of suspense after an examination these days, awaiting results. Nibbāna examination, on the other hand, yields results then and there and produces the certificate immediately. So we see the quality visible here now implicating a timelessness. Unfortunately, however, the term Akalika also suffered by much commentarial jargon. Meanings totally foreign to the original sense came to be tagged on, so much so that it was taken to mean true for all times or eternal. The Samidni Sutta in the Devata Samyutta of the Samyutta Nikaya clarifies for us the original meaning of the term Akalika. One day, Venerable Samidni had a bath at the hot springs in Tapodarama and was drying his body outside in the sun. A deity, seeing his handsome body, gave him an advice contrary to the spirit of the Dhamma. Bhunja bhikkhu manusake game ma santitikang hidva kalikang anudhavi. Enjoy among human sensual pleasures. Do not abandon what is visible here and now and run after what takes time. Comment, translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Enjoy human sensual pleasures, Bhikkhu. Do not abandon what is directly visible in order to pursue what takes time. And here's the Chinese version. It speaks of the 5 sensual pleasures, but otherwise makes the same point. End of comment. Venerable Samidni met the challenge with the following explanatory reply. Nakhahang avosu sandittikang hitva kalikang anudhavami. Kalikang chikhvahang avosu hitva sandittikang anudhavami. Kalikaya avosu kamavutta bhagavata bahu dukkha bahupayasa adinava ittabbhiyo. Sandittiko ayang dhammo akaliko epasiko upanayiko pacchattam viditabbo vinyuhi. It is not the case, friend, that I abandon what is visible here and now in order to run after what involves time. On the contrary, I am abandoning what involves time to run after what is visible here and now. For the fortunate one has said that sensual pleasures are time-involving, fraught with much suffering, much despair, and that more danger lurks in them. Visible here and now is this Dhamma, timeless, inviting one to come and see, leading one onwards, to be realized personally by the wise. Comment, translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. I have not abandoned what is directly visible, friend, in order to pursue what takes time. I have abandoned what takes time in order to pursue what is directly visible. For the Blessed One, friend, has stated that sensual pleasures are time-consuming, full of suffering, full of despair, and the danger in them is still greater, while this Dhamma is directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable to be personally experienced by the wise. And here is the Samyukta Agama version, and it differs in so far as we have the deity asking a question. So when somebody states that he is doing the opposite of what the deity thought, then the deity wants an explanation. How is it that you have given up what is not time, the pleasure, and attained the pleasure of the present moment? And then Venom Samiti gives a similar explanation about sensual pleasures being of time. Yeah. And about the Dhamma, he doesn't list the standard qualities of the Dhamma, but just describes in what sense it's that one can realize it by oneself is also there. End of comment. This explanation makes it clear that the two terms Sandittika and Akanika are allied in meaning. That is why Sandittika is contrasted with Kalika in the above dialogue. What comes after death is Kalika, involving time. It may come or may not come. One cannot be certain about it. But of what is visible here and now in this very life, one can be certain. There is no time gap. It is timeless. The epithet Akalika is implicitly connected with the next epithet Epasika. If the result can be seen here and now without involving time, there's good reason for the challenge, come and see. If the result can only be seen in the next world, all one can see is go and see. As a matter of fact, it is not the Buddha who says come and see, it is the Dhamma itself that makes this challenge. That is why the term Epasika is regarded as an epithet of the Dhamma. Dhamma itself invites the wise to come and see. Those who took up the challenge right in earnest have proved for themselves the realizable nature of the Dhamma, which is the justification for the last epithet, Pacchattam Viditabbo Vinyuhi, to be experienced by the wise, each one by oneself. The inviting nature of the Dhamma leads to a personal experience, and that highlights the Upanayika quality of leading onwards. True to the statement tattha tattha viharantang tattaya upanissati, the Dhamma leads him onwards to appropriate states as he lives according to it. Sometimes the Buddha sums up the entire body of Dhamma he has preached in terms of the 37 participative factors of enlightenment. Particularly in the Nibbāna Sutta, we find him addressing the monks in the following memorable words. Tasmatya bhikkhave yete maya dhamma bhinya desita tevo sadhukam upangahetva asevitabba bhavitabba bahulikatabba yataidang brahmacharyang addhaniyang sachiratitindikam tatasa bahujana hitaya bahujana sukhaya lokanukampaya attaya hitaya sukhaya devamanusanam Katamacha te bhikkhave dhamma maya bhinya desita yevo sarukam upangahetva sevitabba bhavitabba bahulika tabba yathairang brahmacharyang addhaniyang sachiratnitikam tatassa bahujana hitaya bahujana sukhaya lokanukampaya attaya hitaya sukhaya devamanusanam seyatidang chattaro satipatthana chattaro samapadhana chattaro idnipada Panchindriyani, Panchapalani, Sattapojjanga, Aryo Attangiko Magno. Therefore, monks, whatever dhammas I have preached with higher knowledge, you should cultivate, develop, and practice thoroughly, so that this holy life would last long and endure for a long time, thereby conducing to the well-being and happiness of many, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, the well-being, and the happiness of gods and men. And what monks are those dhammas I have preached with higher knowledge that you should cultivate, develop, and practice thoroughly, so that this holy life would last long and endure for a long time, thereby conducing to the well-being and happiness of many, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, the well-being, and the happiness of gods and men. They are the four foundations of mindfulness, the four right endeavors, the four bases for success, the five faculties, the five powers, the seven factors of enlightenment, and the Noble Eightfold Path. Comment translation by Maurice Walsh. Monks, for this reason, those methods which I have discovered and proclaimed should be thoroughly learned by you, practiced, developed, and cultivated, so that this holy life may endure for a long time, that it may be for the benefit and happiness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit and happiness of devas and humans. And what are those matters? They are the four foundations of mindfulness, the four right efforts, the four roads to power, the five spiritual faculties, the five mental powers, the seven factors of enlightenment, and the Noble Eightfold Path. And here I have just given the Dirgha Agama parallel. A survey of all the parallels can be found in the comparative study by Ernst Waldschmidt. And the interesting thing is that if those of you who can read Chinese in the second line, the second group, these two characters, these are the four jhanas. And this is a standard addition we find in some listings of what later tradition calls the Bodhipakkhya Dhammas, that the four absorptions are also added in. So we have the four satipatthanas, the four right efforts, mistranslated here as pahana instead of padana, the four basis of success, as Venerable Ñāṇananda translates, is usually translated as the four roads to supernormal power, and then we get the four absorptions. Then the five faculties, the five powers, the seven awakening factors, and the Noble Eightfold Path. And the listing in itself seems to have gone through stages of expansion, and this is one where we can see variations between different Agama traditions. End of comment. This group of Dhammas, collectively known as the 37 participative factors of enlightenment, illustrates the quality of leading onwards according to the twin principles of relativity and pragmatism. It is customary in the present age to define the Dhamma from an academic point of view as constituting a set of canonical texts. But here in this context, in the Nibbāna Sutta, at such a crucial juncture as the final passing away, we find the Buddha defining the Dhamma from a practical point of view, laying emphasis on the practice. It is as if the Buddha is entrusting to the monks a toolkit before his departure. The 37 participative factors of enlightenment are comparable to a toolkit, or rather an assemblage of 7 toolkits. Each of these 7 is well arranged with an inner consistency. Let us now examine them. First comes the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This group of Dhammas deserves pride of place due to its fundamental importance. The term Satipatthana has been variously interpreted by scholars, some with reference to the term Patthana and others connecting it with Upattana. It seems more natural to associate it with the word Patthana, foundation, as the basis for the practice. Comment here, this suggestion, I found this surprising because pretty much all of the evidence we have points in the opposite direction. In fact, the word Patthana is not found in the suttas, it only occurs in the Abhidharma. And as one of 2 additional readings for this lecture, I will be uploading my Satipatthana, the Direct Path to Realization, and on page 29 following you can find the relevant discussion. But putting it matter just very simply, as the Venerable in fact quotes right after the usual verb used in relation to satis, upatita sati, we have here the expression, which again points to upattana. And we also find that in the Sanskrit smriti upasthana. And so the emphasis with upattana, with the upattana derivation, is more on the establishing of mindfulness. It is more on the attitude. Whereas with patthana, the emphasis is more on what is the object, the foundation for mindfulness. And I assume that the patthana derivation, which is the one favored by the commentaries, relates to this overall thrust in later Theravada exegesis of being very much concerned with objects. Satipatthana then is the question, what are the objects of Satipatthana? And you get that in various ways. It's a common experience when working with a Theravada, traditional Theravada meditation teacher. Any experience related, the teacher will immediately quip back, what was the object? What is the object of the mind? There is I think you can call it an obsession. Yeah, it's almost an obsession. Obsession is a little bit too strong, but I don't come up with a better term right now. So let us leave obsession. There's an obsession with object, an obsession with immediately establishing the subject-object duality that does not leave any room for experiences where this is not so prominent. And this is interesting because we get very opposite in Mahayana practice lineages, where there is the whole emphasis on no object, on non-dual, no subject-object duality. And both, in a way, capture only part of what we find in early Buddhism, where at times it is very useful to have this clear-cut subject-object duality, to have that clear understanding, but at other times the non-dual also has its place. And so with coming back to Satipatthana, I was very surprised to find Venerable Ñāṇananda going for the commentarial explanation, which is also not in keeping with the etymology that we know. And it also doesn't work so well with the fact that Satipatthana, they are not only the 4 body, feeling, tone, mind, and dharmas. There's another way in that very Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, actually, 3 Satipatthanas practiced by the Buddha. And here, the object, if we can call it such, doesn't really fit smoothly into any of the traditional form, because it describes three situations when the Buddha teaches. Everybody listens, some don't listen, nobody listens. And in each of these three situations, the Buddha has the same balanced, equanimous, and mindful attitude. So I think this serves as a support confirmation, as a confirmation that the term Satipatthana is more about the attitude. It is not so much about body, feeling, mind, and dharmas, because other objects that do not exactly fit into these four categories can also become an object of Satipatthana. It is much more of that combining mindfulness with diligence, in the sense of making effort at its continuity, and clear comprehension, that wisdom factor in sampajana, and this overarching goal of staying away from greedy desires and sadness in the world, vinaya lokya vijjadomana sang, or even more beautifully explained in the part that I like to call the refrain, anisito cha viharati chakinchi loke upadiyati, dwelling independently without clinging to anything. I think that is really what Satipatthana is about. And that is where, with the derivation upatana, the establishing, the attending, upataka is an attendant, somebody who stands close by. That emphasis on the appropriate attitude, on the collaboration of mental qualities as what makes up Satipatthana, can be given more emphasis. End of comment. Upatita sati is a term for one who has mastered mindfulness based on the four foundations. As for instance, in the aphorism, Upatita satta sayang dhammo, nayang dhamma mutta sattisam. This dhamma is for one who is attended by mindfulness, not for one who has lost it. The four foundations themselves exhibit an orderly arrangement. The four are termed Kayanupasana, contemplation on the body; Vedananupasana, contemplation on feelings; Chittanupasana, contemplation on the mind; and Dhammanupasana, contemplation on mind objects. So here we have a basis for the exercise of mindfulness, beginning with the gross object, gradually leading on to subtler objects. It is easy enough to contemplate on the body. As one goes on setting up mindfulness on the body, one becomes more aware of feelings and makes them too the object of mindfulness. This gradual process need not be interpreted as so many cut and dried separate stages. There's a subtle, imperceptible interconnection between these four foundations themselves. To one who has practiced contemplation on the body, not only pleasant and unpleasant feelings, but also neither painful nor pleasant feeling, imperceptible to ordinary people, becomes an object for mindfulness. So also are the subtler distinctions between worldly samisa and unworldly niramisa feelings. As one progresses to Chittanupasana, contemplation on the mind, one becomes aware of the color light system of the mind in response to feelings. The alternations between a lustful mind, saragam chittam, a hateful mind, sarosam chittam, and a deluded mind, sammoham chittam, as well as their opposites. Further on in his practice, he becomes conversant with the wirings underlying this color light system of the mind, and the know-how necessary for controlling it. With Dhammanupasana, he is gaining the skill in avoiding and overcoming negative mental states and encouraging and stabilizing positive mental states. Let us now see whether there is a connection between the four foundations of mindfulness and the four right endeavors. For purposes of illustration, we may take up the subsection on the hindrances included under Dhammanupasana, contemplation of mind objects. There we read, Yathacha anupannassa kama chandassa umparoho ditancha pajanati. Yathacha uppannassa kama chandassa pahanho ditancha pajanati. And he also understands how there comes to be the arising of unarisen sensual desire, and how there comes to be the abandoning of arisen sensual desire. Comment, translation by Ñāṇamoli. He also understands how there comes to be the arising of unarisen sensual desire, and how there comes to be the abandoning of arisen sensual desire. And the Madhyama Agama also has a similar instruction. He knows as it really is how unarisen sensual desire arises, and he knows as it really is how arisen sensual desire ceases. In the Kotarika Agama, the part on Dhammanupassana, there seems to be some problem, so it doesn't have this. It only has the hindrances at the outset. It's not very reliable, this part of the Ekotarika Agama parallel to the Satipatthana Sutta. And I just wanted to comment on the translation of Dhammanupassana as contemplation on mind objects. I don't think that works. I don't think the fourth Satipatthana is about mind objects. In fact, at least when we look at the Pali version, it has the 5 aggregates, which are not kind of mind objects. It has the 6 sense spheres, where mind objects is only 1 out of the 6. It simply doesn't work, so it's better to translate as contemplation on dharmas and then try to understand or explain what dharmas are. And this is something that will come back soon again. I just wanted to mention that contemplation on mind objects is not a good translation. End of comment. These 2 statements in the subsection on the hindrances could be related to the first 2 out of the 4 right endeavors. Anupanānaṁ pāpakānaṁ akusalaнаṁ dhammānaṁ anupadāya chandang janeti vāyamati viryaṁ ārabhati cittaṁ paganhāti badahati. Upanānaṁ pāpakānaṁ akusalanaṁ dhammānaṁ pahānāya chandang janeti vāyamati viryaṁ ārabhati cittaṁ paganhāti badahati. For the non-arising of unarisen, evil, unskillful mental states, he arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind, and endeavors. For the abandoning of arisen, evil, unskillful mental states, he arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind, and endeavors. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Ñāṇamoli. Here Bhikkhu awakens zeal for the non-arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome states, and he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind, and strives. He awakens zeal for the abandoning of arisen, evil, unwholesome states, etc. End of comment. The understanding of the hindrances is the precondition for this right endeavor. What we have in the Satipatthana Sutta is a statement to the effect that one comprehends pajanati, the way hindrances arise, as well as the way they are abandoned. Right endeavor is already implicated. With mindfulness and full awareness, one sees what is happening, but that is not all. Right endeavor has to step in. Just as the first 2 right endeavors are relevant to the subsection on the hindrances, the next 2 right endeavors could be related to the following 2 statements in the subsection on the enlightenment factors in the Satipatthana Sutta. Yathachanupanassa sati sambojjangassa uparuhoti tancha pajanati. Yathacha upannassa sati sambojjangassa bhavana bharipuri hoti tancha pajanati. And he also understands how there comes to be the arising of the unarisen mindfulness enlightenment factor, and how the arisen mindfulness enlightenment factor comes to fulfillment by development. Comment translation by Ñāṇamoli. He also understands how there comes to be the arising of the unarisen mindfulness enlightenment factor, and how the arisen mindfulness enlightenment factor comes to fulfillment by development. And the Madhyama Agama. He knows as it really is how the unarisen mindfulness awakening factor arises, and he knows as it really is how the arisen mindfulness awakening factor is maintained without loss or deterioration, and how it is further developed and increased. End of comment. One can compare these 2 aspects of the Dhammanupassana section in the Satipatthana Sutta with the 2 right endeavors on the positive side. Comment. Before going into this correlation, I just wanted to mention that the comparative perspective that emerges on studying the Satipatthana Sutta is very much in line with what Venerable Ñāṇananda presents here. Strictly speaking, the three discourse versions only share the awakening factors under this fourth Satipatthana. But as I said previously briefly, in the Ekotarika Agama version of this fourth Satipatthana, there seems to be something has gone wrong. And my own reconstruction is that the hindrances would have been originally part of the fourth Satipatthana, but were then pushed to a different place in the sutta during oral transmission due to being replaced by the four jhanas. The four jhanas makes no sense under the fourth Satipatthana. It's an later introduction. And so if we grant this reconstruction, we can say that the contemplation of the hindrances and contemplation of the awakening factors are like the key aspect of contemplation of dharmas. If we do not grant the reconstruction I just proposed, it would be just the awakening factors. Whatever of these two options then does not make a difference insofar as, from a practical viewpoint, the cultivation of the awakening factors anyway requires the ability to stay away, to emerge from the hindrances. And it also does not make a difference for understanding of what Dhammanupasana here then means. Dhammanupasana seems to have as its central thrust the establishing of those mental conditions that make awakening possible, and done with a particular emphasis on conditionality, on practically working with conditionality. So we have mindfulness exploring experience from the viewpoint of body, feeling, tone, and mind. And then as the rounding off, the thrust towards awakening, the orientation towards awakening, the establishing of the mental conditions, dhammas, that make possible the realization of the converging point of the teachings, dhamma. That would be my understanding of contemplation of dhammas. End of comment. Anupanānaṁ kusalaṇaṁ dhammaṇaṁ upadāya chandang janeti vayamati viryaṁ harabati chittaṁ paganhati padahati Upanānaṁ kusalaṇaṁ dhammaṇaṁ didya samosāya vyobhavaya vipullāya bhavanāya paripurya chandang janeti vayamati viryaṁ harabati chittaṁ paganhati padahati. For the arising of unarisen skillful mental states, he arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind and endeavors. For the stability, non-limits, increase, amplitude, and fulfillment by the development of arisen skillful mental states, he arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind and endeavors. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Ñāṇamoli. He awakens zeal for the arising of unarisen wholesome states. He awakens zeal for the continuance, non-disappearance, strengthening, increase, and fulfillment by development of arisen wholesome states. And he makes effort, browses energy, exerts his mind, and strives. Just before, I forgot to mention that the second additional reading that I will be offering for this lecture is my comparative study of the Satipatthana Sutta, Perspectives on Satipatthana. And there it's particularly page 174 following, where I have this discussion of the hindrances and awakening factors that I just briefly summarized. End of comment. This is the right endeavor regarding skillful mental states. Why we refer to this aspect in particular is that there is at present a tendency among those who recommend Satipatthana meditation to overemphasize the role of attention. They seem to assert that bare attention or noticing is all that is needed. The reason for such an attitude is probably the attempt to specialize in Satipatthana in isolation, without reference to the rest of 37 participative factors of enlightenment. Comment, yeah, I find this a very important point. There is certainly a place for bare attention, and this just noting is an important dimension of Satipatthana meditation, But to reduce Satipatthana to just that is really missing out on the context. End of comment. The 7 toolkits are interconnected. From the Satipatthana toolkit, the Samapadhana toolkit comes out as a matter of course. That is why bare attention is not the be-all and end-all of it. Proper attention is actually the basis for right endeavor. Even when a machine is out of order, there's a need for tightening or loosening somewhere. But first of all, one has to mindfully scan or scrutinize it. That is why there is no explicit reference to effort in the Satipatthana Sutta. Comment: I think when Ñāṇananda means right effort, that there is no explicit mention in the sense of an effort that intervenes and does something. I mean, we have atapi in the definition formula, which I like to translate as diligent, but usually is translated as ardently. But that is not the point. The point I think when Ñāṇananda is making here is that there is that the instructions in Satipatthana are about uninvolved observation, not about making an active effort to intervene and do something. End of comment. But based on that scrutiny, the 4 right endeavors play their role in regard to unskillful and skillful mental states. So we see the close relationship between the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the 4 right efforts. It is also interesting to examine the relationship between the 4 right endeavors and the 4 paths to success. We have already quoted a phrase that is commonly used with reference to all the 4 right endeavors, namely Chandang Janeti Vayamati Viryang Arabhati Chittang Pakanhati Padahati. Arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind and endeavors. Here we have a string of terms, suggestive of striving, systematically arranged in an ascending order. Chandang Janeti refers to the interest or the desire to act. Vayamati suggests effort or exercise. Viryang Arabhati has to do with the initial application of energy. Chittang Paganhati stands for that firmness of resolve or grit. Padahati signifies the final all-out effort or endeavor. Comment: yeah, I appreciate the point Ñāṇananda makes, and here we'll be soon giving a very nice illustration there. I just wanted to say in general that this string of terms is a very common feature of early Buddhist oral transmission, and it is simply a way of making sure that the basic meaning is understood by the audience and preserved during oral transmission by repetition. It does not necessarily mean that there's like a particularly deep sense and that every word used in such a string must have something additional to say. It can just be a string of terms to express one single basic meaning. End of comment. These terms more or less delineate various stages in a progressive effort. One who practices the 4 right endeavors in course of time specializes in one or the other of the 4 bases for success in Nibbāna. That is why the 4 bases for success are traceable to the 4 right endeavors. To illustrate the connection between the right endeavors and the 4 bases for success, let us take up a simile. Suppose there's a rock which we want to get out of our way. We wish to topple it over. Since our wishing it away is not enough, we put some kind of lever underneath it and see whether it responds to our wish. Even if the rock is unusually obstinate, we at least give our shoulders an exercise, vayamati, in preparation for the effort. Once we are ready, we heave slowly, viryang arabhati. But then it looks as if the rock is precariously balanced, threatening to roll back. So we grit our teeth and make a firm resolve, chittang paganhati. Now comes the last decisive spurt. With one deep breath, well aware that it could be our last if the rock had its own way, we push it away with all our might. It is this last all-out endeavor that in the highest sense is called samapadhana or right endeavor. In the context of the right endeavor for enlightenment, it is called Chaturanga Samanagata Virya, effort accompanied by four factors, which is worded as follows. Kamang tachocha naharocha adnicha avasisatum, sarire upasusatum, mangsalvetam. Yang tam purisa thamena purisa viryena purisa parakkamena pattabang natang appapanirva viryasa santanang bhavisati. Verily, let my skin, sinews, and bones remain, and let the flesh and blood dry up in my body. But I will not relax my energy so long as I have not attained what can be attained by manly strength, manly energy, manly exertion. Common translation by Ñāṇananda. Willingly let only my skin, sinews, and bones remain, and let the flesh and blood dry up on my body. But my energy shall not be relaxed so long as I have not attained what can be attained by manly strength, manly energy, and manly persistence. And the Madhyama Agama, the Blessed One teaches me the Dharma, the Bhagavan One teaches me the Dharma. May I for a long time derive benefit from it, may I attain welfare, peace, and happiness from it. Yeah, I find this a remarkable contrast, and I am personally not particularly comfortable with this formulation found in the Pali version, this idea of letting the flesh and blood dry up. To my mind, and that is just my personal take, gives me an impression of an unbalanced energy, not quite in line with that beautiful verse from the beginning of the Samyutta Nikaya of finding a balance between standstill and striving. And I also don't particularly like this manly strength, energy, and persistence, this kind of gender type of terminology. And to me, what comes here in the Madhyama Agama is much more to the point. May I attain welfare, peace, and happiness from it. Anyhow, that is just my personal take. End of comment. Though as an illustration we took an ordinary worldly object, a rock, one can substitute for it the gigantic mass of suffering to make it meaningful in the context of the Dhamma. It is the formula for the toppling of this mass of suffering that is enshrined in the phrase Chandang Janeti Vayamati Viryang Arabati Chittan Paganhati Padahati. Arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind and endeavors. The four bases for success in Nibbāna, namely Chanda, desire, Virya, energy, Chitta, mind, and Vimamsa, investigation, to a great extent are already implicit in the above formula. Clear enough, Chandang Janeti represents Chand in Nibbāna. Vayamati and Viryangarabhati together stand for Virya in Nibbāna, while Chittang Paganhati stands for the power of determination implied by Chitta in Nibbāna. Apparently, investigation, Vimamsa, as an Iddhipada has no representative in the above formula. However, in the process of mindfully going over and over again through these stages in putting forth effort, one becomes an adept in the art of handling a situation. In fact, Vimamsa, or investigation, is panya, or wisdom in disguise. Even toppling a rock is not a simple task. One has to have the know-how in order to accomplish it. So then, all the four bases for success emerge from the four right endeavors. What is meant by Iddhipada? Since the word Iddhi is associated with psychic power, it is easy to mistake it as a base for psychic power. But the basic sense of Iddhi is success or proficiency. For instance, Samiddhi means prosperity. It is perhaps more appropriate to render it as a base for success, because for the attainment of Nibbāna also the development of the Iddhipadas is recommended. Going by the illustration given above, we may say, in general, that for all mundane and supramundane accomplishments, the four bases hold good to some extent or other. In the Nibbāna Samyutta, these four bases for success are described as four ways to accomplish the task of attaining influx-free deliverance of the mind and deliverance by wisdom. With the experience gathered in the course of practicing the fourfold right endeavor, One comes to know one's strong point, where one's forte lies. One might recognize chanda, desire or interest, as one's strong point and give it first place. In the case of the basis for success, it is said that even one would do as the others fall in line. According to the commentaries, Venerable Rattapala of the Buddha's time belonged to the Chanda category, and Venerable Mogaraja had Vimamsa as his forte, excelling in wisdom. Someone might get so interested in a particular course of action and get an intense desire and tell himself, somehow I must do it. To that wish, the others, energy, determination, and investigation become subservient. Another might discover that his true personality emerges in the thick of striving. So he would make energy the base for success in his quest for Nibbāna. Yet another has as its strong point a steel determination. The other three fall in line with it. One who belongs to the wisdom category is never tired of investigation. He even literally leaves no stone unturned if he gets curious to see what lies underneath. The fact that there is a normative tendency for Iddipadas to work in unison comes to light in the description of Iddipada meditation in the Samyutta Nikaya. For instance, in regard to Chanda Iddipada, we find the descriptive initial statement. Ida Bhikkave Bhikkhu Chanda Samadhi Padana Sankara Samanagatam Iddipadam Bhavati. Herein, a monk develops the base for success that is equipped with preparations for endeavor arising from desire concentration. Now, what is this Chanda Samadhi or desire concentration? This strange type of concentration, not to be found in other contexts, is explained in the Chanda Sutta itself as follows. Channang che bhikkhave bhikkhu nissaya labati samadhi labati chittasya kagatam ayam bucchati chanda samadhi. If by relying on desire monks, a monk gets concentration, gets one-pointedness of mind, this is called desire concentration. Common translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Because if a bhikkhu gains concentration, gains one-pointedness of mind based upon desire, this is called concentration due to desire. End of comment. Due to sheer interest or desire, a monk might reach a steady state of mind, like some sort of concentration. With that as his basis, he applies himself to the four right endeavors. So anupananang papakanang akusalanang dhammanang anupadaya chandang janeti vayamati viryam arabati chittang paganhati badhati uppannanang papakanang akusalanang dhammanang pahanaya chandang janeti vayamati viryam arabati chittang paganhati badhati Anupananang kusalanang dhammanang uppadaya chandang janeti vayamati viryam arabati chittang paganhati padhati Uppannanang kusalanang dhammanang titiya asammusaya bhyo bhavaya vipulaya bhavanaya paripurya chandang janeti vayamati viryam arabati chittang paganhati padhati. For the non-arising of unreason, evil, unskillful mental states, he arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind and endeavors. For the abandoning of arisen, evil, unskillful mental states, he arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind and endeavors. For the rising of unarisen, skillful mental states, he arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind and endeavors. For the stability, non-remiss, increase, amplitude, and fulfillment by development of arisen, skillful mental states, he arouses a desire, makes an effort, puts forth energy, makes firm the mind, and endeavors. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. He generates desire for the non-arising of arisen, evil, unwholesome states. For the abandoning of arisen, evil, unwholesome states. For the arising of arisen, wholesome states. For the maintenance of arisen wholesome states, for their non-decay, increase, expansion, and fulfillment by development, he makes an effort, arouses energy, applies his mind, strives. These are called volitional formations of striving. End of comment. So here again, the standard definition of the four right endeavors is given. The implication is that once the base for success is ready, the four right endeavors take off from it. The four bases for success are therefore so many ways of specializing in various aspects of striving, with a view to wielding the four right endeavors all the more effectively. All the constituents of right endeavor harmoniously fall in line with the four bases for success. Here then we have a concept of four types of concentration as basis for right endeavor. Chanda Samadhi, desire concentration; Virya Samadhi, energy concentration; Chitta Samadhi, mind concentration; and Vimamsa Samadhi, investigation concentration. Now, what is meant by Padhana Sankara? Preparations for right endeavor. It refers to the practice of the four right endeavors with one or the other base as a solid foundation. Padhana is endeavor or all-out effort. Sankara are those preparations directed towards it. Finally, the Buddha analyzes the long compound to highlight its constituents. Iti ayam cha chanda, ayam cha chanda samadhi, ime cha padhana sankara, ayam uchiti bhikkave chanda samadhi padhana sankara samanagato Nibbāna. Thus this desire, and this desire concentration, and these preparations for endeavor. This is called the base for success that is equipped with preparations for endeavor arising from desire concentration. Comment translation by Bhikkhu. Thus this desire and this concentration due to desire and these volitional formations of striving. This is called the basis for spiritual power that possesses concentration due to desire and volitional formations of striving. End of comment. So we see how the four bases for success come out of the four right endeavors. The relation between the four bases for success and the next toolkit, the five faculties, Panchindriya, may not be so clear. But there is an implicit connection which might need some explanation. The five faculties here meant are faith, saddha, energy, virya, mindfulness, sati, concentration, samadhi, and wisdom, panya. The four bases for success provide the proper environment for the rising of the five faculties. The term indriya, faculty, has connotations of dominance and control. When one has specialized in the basis for success, it is possible to give predominance to certain mental states. Saddha or faith is chanda, desire or interest in disguise. It is in one who has faith and confidence that desire and interest arise. With keen interest in skillful mental states, one is impelled to take an initiative. The Buddha gives the following description of Saddindriya. Katacha bhikkhave saddindriyam dattabbam chatursu sutapatiyangesu. Where amongst is the faculty of faith to be seen in the four factors of stream entry? Comment translation by Bhikkhu. And where, because is the faculty of faith to be seen? The faculty of faith is to be seen here in the four factors of stream entry. And Samyukta Agama makes the same in a slightly shorter manner, but makes the same statement. End of comment. The four factors of stream entry, briefly stated, are as follows. Buddhi avicca pasadena samanagato, dhamme avicca pasadena samanagato, sanghe avicca pasadena samanagato, aryakante sile samanagato. One is endowed with confidence born of understanding in the Buddha, endowed with confidence born of understanding in the Dhamma, endowed with confidence born of understanding in the Sangha, endowed with virtues dear to the noble ones. The stream winner has a deep faith in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, and in the Sangha that is born of understanding. His virtue is also of a higher order, since it is well based on that faith. So in the definition of the faculty of faith, we have an echo of Chanda in Nibbāna. It can also be inferred that Virindriya, the faculty of energy, also takes off from the energy base for success. We are told, Katta cha bhikkhave virindriyam dattabam chatusu samapadhyanesu. And where monks is the faculty of energy to be seen? In the four right endeavors. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And where bhikkhus is the faculty of energy to be seen? The faculty of energy is to be seen here in the four right strivings. And Samyukta Agama makes the same statement, but again it differs. There's this difference in terminology we get throughout Buddhist tradition, whether it's Sammapadana or Sammapahana. And it has here the Chinese reflex, the Sammapahana, right, abandoning. So, end of comment. The faculty of energy is obviously nurtured by the four right endeavors and the four bases for success. The antecedents of Satindriya, the faculty of mindfulness, may not be so obvious. But from the stage of Satipatthana onwards, it has played its silent role, impartially, throughout almost unseen. Here too, it stands in the middle of the group of leaders without taking sides. In fact, its role is the preserving of the balance of powers between those who are on either side, the balancing of faculties. About the place of Satindriya, the Buddha says, Kattacha bhikkhave Satindriyam dattabam chatusu saripathanesu. And where amongst is the faculty of mindfulness to be seen? In the four foundations of mindfulness. It is the same four foundations, now reinforced by greater experience in vigilance. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And where bhikkhus is the faculty of mindfulness to be seen? The faculty of mindfulness is to be seen here in the four establishments of mindfulness. And here we have the Chinese, which makes the same statement. End of comment. Then comes the faculty of concentration, samadhindriya. We already had a glimpse of it at the Nibbāna stages: Chanda Samadhi, desire concentration; Virya Samadhi, energy concentration; Chitta Samadhi, mind concentration; and Vimamsa Samadhi, investigation concentration. But it was only a steadiness or stability that serves as a makeshift launching pad for concentrated effort. But here in this context, Samadhindriya has a more refined sense. It is formally defined with reference to the four jhanic attainments. Kattacha bhikkhave samadhindriyam dattabam chatusu jhanesu. And where monks is the faculty of concentration to be seen? In the four absorptions. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And where bhikkhus is the faculty of concentration to be seen? The faculty of concentration is to be seen here in the four jhanas. And the Chinese makes the same statement. End of comment. Sometimes rather exceptionally, another definition is also given. Ida bhikkhave arya savako bossagaramanam karitva labati samadhin labati chitta sekagatam. Here in monks, a noble disciple gains concentration, gains one-pointedness of the mind, having made release its object. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Here, because the noble disciple gains concentration, gains one-pointedness of mind, having made release the object. End of comment. However, it is by the development of the basis for success that concentration emerges as a full-fledged faculty. Lastly, there is the faculty of wisdom, panyindriya. Though it has some relation to vimamsa or investigation as a base for success, it is defined directly with reference to the Four Noble Truths. Kattacha bhikkhave panyindriyam dattabam chatusu arya satchesu. And where amongst is the faculty of wisdom to be seen? In the Four Noble Truths. Comment translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And where bhikkhus is the faculty of wisdom to be seen? The faculty of wisdom is to be seen here in the Four Noble Truths. And the Chinese again agrees. End of comment. Nevertheless, in the Four Noble Truths too, we see some parallelism with the illustration for Iddhipadas we picked up. Suffering, its arising, its cessation, and the path to its cessation is comparable to our reaction to our encounters with that stumbling block, the book. In the context of insight, Panyindriya is defined in terms of the knowledge of rise and fall, Udayattagamini Panya. The sharpness of faculties may vary from person to person according to their samsaric background. The Buddha, who could see this difference between persons, Puggala Vimattata, was able to tame them easily. As we have already mentioned, mindfulness is in the middle of this group of faculties. Being the mainstay of the entire Satipatthana practice, it renders a vigilant service in silence here too, as the arbiter in the struggle for power between the two factions on either side. Now that they have the dominance, Saddha faith and Panya wisdom drag to either side, wishing to go their own way. Mindfulness has to strike a balance between them. Likewise, virya, energy, and samadhi, concentration, left to themselves, tend to become extravagant, and mindfulness has to caution them to be moderate. So in this toolkit of faculties, sati is the spanner for tightening or loosening, for relaxing or gripping. Comment, yeah, I think what Venerable Ñāṇananda means here is not that sati itself, herself, directly intervenes, but that she provides the kind of information required for then tightening or loosening, relaxing or gripping. End of comment. Alternatively, one can discern another orderly arrangement among these five faculties. In the Indriya Samyutta, Venerable Sariputta extols the wonderful inner coherence between these faculties before the Buddha in the following words. Saddhasya bhanta arya savakasa etang parikankam yang aradha viryo viharisati akusalang dhammanang pahanaya kusalang dhammanang upasampadaya thamava dalla parakkamo anikitta dhoro kusalesu dhammesu yang hissa bhante viryam tadasa viryendriyam. Saddhasya hi bantarya savakasya aradha viryasya etang patikankam yang satima bhavisati paramena satinepakena samanagato chirkatampi chirabhasitampi sarita anusarita yahisa banta sati tadasa satindriyam. Saddhasya hi banta arya savakasya aradha viryasya upattita satinu etang patikankam yang vassagaramanam karitva labhisati samadhin labhisati chittasya ekaggatam yang hisa bhanta samadhi tadasa samadhindriyam. Saddhasya hi bhanta arya savakasya aradha viryasya upattita satina samayita chittasya etang patikankam yang evang pajjani sati annumatangoko sangsaro Pubbakotina panyayati avidya nivarananang sattanang tanha sanyojananang sandhavatang sangsartang avidyaya tamokayassa asesa viraga nirodho santang etang padang panitang etang padang yadidang sabba sankara samato sabbo paripati nisaggo tanhakayo virago nirodho nibbāna yang hisabante panya tadasa panyindriyam. It could indeed be expected, Venerable Sir, of a noble disciple who has faith, that he will dwell with energy put forth for the abandoning of unskillful states and the rising of skillful states, that he will be steady, resolute in exertion, not shirking the burden of fulfilling skillful states. That energy of his, Venerable Sir, is his faculty of energy. It could indeed be expected, Venerable Sir, of that noble disciple who has faith, who has put forth energy, that he will be mindful, endowed with supreme adeptness in mindfulness, one who remembers and recollects what was done and said even long ago. That mindful of his, Venerable Sir, is his faculty of mindfulness. It could indeed be expected, Venerable Sir, of that noble disciple who has faith, who has put forth energy, and who is attended by mindfulness, that he will gain concentration, will gain one-pointedness of mind, having made release the object. That concentration of his, Venerable Sir, is his faculty of concentration. It could indeed be expected, Venerable Sir, of that noble disciple who has faith, who has put forth energy, who is attended by mindfulness, and whose mind is concentrated, that he will understand thus. The samsara is without a conceivable beginning. A first point is not discernible of beings roaming and wandering, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. But the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance, the mass of darkness, this is the peaceful state, this is the excellent state, that is, the stilling of all preparations, the relinquishment of all assets, the destruction of craving, detachment, cessation, extinction. That wisdom of his Venerable Sir is his faculty of wisdom. Comment, translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi. It is indeed to be expected, Venerable Sir, that a noble disciple who has faith will dwell with energy aroused for the abandoning of unwholesome states and the acquisition of wholesome states, that he will be strong, firm in exertion, not shirking the responsibility of cultivating wholesome states. That energy of his Venerable Sir is his faculty of energy. It is indeed to be expected, Venerable Sir, that a noble disciple who has faith and whose energy is aroused will be mindful, possessing supreme mindfulness and discretion, one who remembers and recollects what was done and said long ago. That mindfulness of his Venerable Sir is his faculty of mindfulness. It is indeed to be expected, Venerable Sir, that a noble disciple who has faith, whose energy is aroused, and whose mindfulness is established, will gain concentration, will gain one-pointedness of mind, having made release the object. That concentration of his Venerable Sir is his faculty of concentration. It is indeed to be expected, Venerable Sir, that a noble disciple who has faith, whose energy is aroused, whose mindfulness is established, and whose mind is concentrated, will understand thus. This samsara is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not discerned of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving. But the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance, the mass of darkness, this is the peaceful state, this is the sublime state, that is, the stilling of all formations, the relinquishment of all acquisitions, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, Nibbāna. That wisdom of his Venerable Sir is his faculty of wisdom. Thank you for your attention.